Today on CodeDependent, I'm going to talk about state transitions and why you might want to animate changes in the GUI to help the user stay connected to the application. So one of the greatest things about FlexFX to me is that it makes it very easy to have these different states that you have in your GUI, different screens that you go to and from, and then it also makes it easy to declare animations saying, okay, when we go from this state to that state, I want you to run the following animations on these target objects. And this makes it easier for the developer to not have to think so much about doing this complex animated behavior, but they can just say, well, these are the different states of my application, these are the animations that I want, and you figure that out, and I have some important business logic to work on. So I wrote this little application, which is sort of a mock-up of a very simple drawing application where you can do what you expect. You can draw some lines, you can draw some circles, you can draw some squares, or if you get really tired, you can just go ahead and pop an image in there instead and be done with it. And maybe in this application, you want it to be tuned for multiple users who may be right-handed or left-handed. Isn't it kind of annoying that the control panel is always on the left? Well, what about left-handed users? Wouldn't it be nice if they could sort of adjust the UI to place it over on the right? So if you click on the radio button there, it'll automatically sort of move things to where they should be for a right-handed or a left-handed control panel, right? But what happens when we do that? Notice everything sort of is erased and then repainted back to where it should be in the new state. Wouldn't it be nice if you could actually transition so that the person that maybe didn't mean to click on that or doesn't know too much about the application isn't then searching for the control panel, especially if it was a much more complex application with things on both sides of the canvas or a more complex image on the canvas or whatever. What if we could actually animate that transition for them instead? So I have some options down here where we can choose to have a linear animation happen over time. So when we switch from right-handed to left-handed, we can fade out the canvas in the middle and then move the controls over. The fading is kind of a nice thing to do because you don't want these things to sort of bump into each other as they're switching places. So let's actually fade one out, move the controls over, fade the canvas back in. Right? But linear is a little bit choppy. You'll notice if we animate this, the controls, sort of jerk along during the animation. It's very unrealistic motion. It's much better to give it acceleration or deceleration behavior. It's much more organic and natural to us as human beings. So let's fade it out fade it out and in, and also ease in, which means accelerate all the way. So we're going to start out slowly, and then we're going to accelerate all the way to the end. Or we can have easing out behavior, where we do the same fading behavior, and then we actually start immediately and then slow down over time until we sort of ease into place right at the end. Or we can do ease in out, which is the default behavior for FlexFX anyway, where we accelerate in and then we decelerate out. And in fact, if you want, we could get a little bit risky here and add in new easing behavior. So let's go ahead and see what it's like to add a bouncing behavior instead. So we can come down to our code here. I'm not going to go into the drawing codes. It's not terribly interesting. I just wanted something simple to illustrate the point. But I can certainly show the animations here. So basically, as you choose different behaviors, well, if you do right-handed and left-handed, then that basically sets the current state to either state 1 or state 2. So we've declared state 1 and state 2 above, and then we've defined information for the controls and the canvas based on whether we're in state 1 or state 2. So the controls in state 2, there is no left, right? We actually want to be positioned over at the right. So we're going to deconstrain our left style in state 2, and we're going to constrain our right style so that we're sort of hugging the right border or the left border, depending on which state we're in. And then the canvas is just defined to then react to that layout itself, and everything positions itself automatically, like magic. So that's the state values, and then what happens is when we change state, we run transitions. So then we have a single transition declared. You'll notice there's actually no effect declared for the transition. The effect is going to be based on what we've selected for the animated behavior in the radio buttons down below. So if we look again at the application, we have these radio buttons here which say no animation or linear or ease in or whatever. So based on the results of those, we then set the effect property of the transition either to null or to one of the effects that we have above. So we can take a look at one of those effects. We can say, okay, no ease sequence. This is going to be the linear movement. So we're going to first do a fade. We're going to fade the canvas out. Then we're going to move both the canvas and the controls into place for a particular duration. Actually, the move doesn't matter as much because the canvas being moved doesn't matter as much because the canvas is now faded out. But it's sort of a general effect here. And then we're going to set the easer to be this linear ease that we've defined above, which is this thing, which basically means don't ease it at all. Just take the elapsed fraction as the animation fraction. And then all the rest of the effects are defined similarly. So let's go ahead and define a new bounce ease and see what we can do here. So let's copy one of these. We'll say we want the bounce, give it a ID of bounce, and it doesn't have an ease in fraction property. So we'll do that. We want a new sequence defined, a new effect defined that actually uses this ease. So we'll call it the bounce sequence. And then here, we've called it bounce, so we'll say our easer is bounce for moving the controls over. And then we need to expose a radio button down below so that they can actually choose this thing. Give it the same easing group. The label will be bounce, and the transition effect will be the bounce sequence. So if we run this, and I type in all the code correctly, then we should see a new radio button down below that says bounce. And now when we switch it, we'll fade out and we'll actually bounce against the other side of the screen, which is maybe not appropriate in a lot of enterprise applications, but is kind of fun in some situations. If you want to see the code for this application and related applications, check out my blog at graphics-geek.blogspot.com.